Good evening, everybody. It's wonderful to be here with all of you to celebrate the publication of the latest book by Chögyam Trungpa, which is entitled Cynicism and Magic, Intelligence and Intuition on the Buddhist Path. And it's great to be doing this with Naropa University and their extended campus program. Very appropriate, given that the book is based on talks that were given at Naropa the first year in 1974. And Naropa has supported the work of the new editors who worked on this project and are being showcased tonight and throughout the coming weeks. So I'm really happy to have all the presenters here this evening. These are all people who worked really closely on the book or have supported this project in other ways, and really happy to have all of you here this evening. So now I'd like to turn it over to Chuck Leaf, who is the president of Naropa, a longtime student, early student of Chögyam Trungpa, and he's been a great supporter, he and Naropa itself, of the work that we've been doing. So good evening, Chuck.
Hi, Carolyn. Thank you, and welcome to now 120 of us. I'm sure we'll have more as the next few minutes go by. It's really a joy for us at Naropa, first in 2017, to have had the good fortune to be able to establish the Chögyam Trungpa Institute at Naropa. Really the inspiration of Carolyn Gimian and Diana Mukpo, who's Trungpa Rinpoche's wife, and whose life has really been around preserving the legacy of Trungpa Rinpoche and his teachings. And so to be able to have a university with this remarkable institute is something which is a real blessing for Naropa. So I'm grateful for that. I want to note that. Carolyn suggested, since it is a Naropa event, that we come together and we start with a bow, which is the way in which we begin classes and meetings and other events at Naropa. It used to be a bow. Now it's actually the Naropa bow, capital T, capital N, capital B. So it's become a thing over the last almost 50 years. And the fun thing about the bow is that if you have an opportunity like I do to hear lots and lots of people describe what it is, it's a kind of a exercise in improv, which is really kind of interesting to hear. Most of the time people get it right. Sometimes it's a little eccentric, but for the most part, excellent. I will base my very brief instruction on the bow on Barbara Dilley's instruction. Barbara Dilley, who's a Naropa icon, a hero, longtime faculty member, longtime president, recently retired, wrote a book, and in that book she presented her view of the bow. So I think it's one of the best, if not the best, and I'm going to offer, with credit to Barbara, some few comments about the bow. So to begin with, if you could all, in wherever you're sitting, however you're sitting, take a comfortable upright posture, whether that's sitting on the floor or on a chair, it doesn't matter, but just sort of settle your body and begin to settle your mind. And there are three components to the Naropa bow. And I'll go through all three, and then we can just do the practice together. It was an early contemplative practice in Naropa, which is held to this day as a really important part of our the creation of space at the university. So first is to hold. And holding means catching the mind that's moving and catching the body that wants to move, and basically settle both body and mind. The second component is feeling the inner being, who we are right now on the spot, how we feel, and to expand that feeling to an awareness of the others. The others, you can't see very many people, but the others that are on this, in this event, the others in the world around us, local and beyond, and the full universe, so feel. And the third component is, which is leaning forward, and the actual physical part of the bow is to give, which is an offering to all the other people in the space around us. It's an offering of respect and of gratitude and of acknowledgement, and an offering again to the broader world of the same qualities. So those are the three components of the bow. As we return to our seated position, if you have your eyes closed, you should have them open when you come back up. As Barbara described it, there could be a smile, maybe an invisible one, maybe a visible one, but either way, there should be that atmosphere of smile. And then just a basic sense of we have arrived. So long description for a very short practice, and I invite you to join me with the bow right now. Thanks. Again, welcome. Carolyn will give thanks and introduce our other panelists, so I will leave to her the introductions. I'm just going to thank people for joining us tonight at this event, and everybody that you will hear from has brought something really important to this project, and we're very grateful for that. But I also want to thank, and when you get the book, you will see their names, the 16 editors who participated in the Opening the Dharma Treasury program, which has happened year after year at Naropa, led by the two mentors, Carolyn Gimian and Judy Leaf, who were longtime editors of Trungpa Rinpoche's work. And those 16 editors brought incredible enthusiasm and energy to our campus. They brought great dedication to the work and have given us a great confidence in the generational future of editing work around Trungpa Rinpoche's teachings and his gifts to the world. And so I want to acknowledge those editors as well. The book content is really important because it was the first really comprehensive teachings by Naropa's founder, Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche. As those of you that know the history may recall, Trungpa Rinpoche and Ram Dass alternated teaching the evenings of our 1974 opening summer session when a couple of thousand people showed up in Boulder, not really sure what they were going to find, but finding a lot. And this battle of the bands between Trungpa Rinpoche and Ram Dass unfolded over the course of the summer, and the content of what is the Cynicism and Magic book arose from that work. I also think it's important to note, and I hadn't actually realized it until today when I was looking through the book again, that the form of the book I think is incredibly important. Many books are edited versions of oral teachings by great teachers, and many of Trungpa Rinpoche's books, of course, are the same. But many of them, not all for sure, but many of them leave out most of the post-teaching questions and answers. And it's understandable. There's a need to keep space at its needed limitations, and there's a reason for need for some cohesion, and sometimes the Q&A kind of goes off in a number of different directions. But I found in looking at a lot of the questions today, the fact is that those questions and the answers in the book are sort of like an archaeological exploration, an archaeological dig. They really are the snapshot of what mindfulness and compassion and spiritual journeyers in 1974 were looking for, or found out that they were looking for, even if they arrived not quite sure of that. And so it's a really kind of powerful opportunity to take a look almost 50 years back at the world that Trungpa Rinpoche basically engaged at that point. This was a post-hippie world. It was almost the end of the war in Vietnam world. It was a moments before Richard Nixon resigned as president in the middle of our second summer session. This was a world still traumatized by the assassination of John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Robert F. Kennedy, and Malcolm X. And within all of that, we had 2,000 people who showed up in Boulder to offer their hearts and their minds, filled with preconceptions, but also with inspiration, with hesitation, with joy, with curiosity, the whole range of mental content. And they came together at what became Naropa University. And what I'll say in closing is that it was true then, and it's even more true now, that Naropa's founding in 1974, and Naropa as an institution then, was no accident in time and space. It was a proclamation by Trungpa Rinpoche of what the world needed then and what the world would continue to need almost some 50 years later and for hundreds of years to come. And so it's a joy for me to have been connected to Naropa for so many years. And it's a delight to be able to celebrate tonight the work by a new generation of Naropa caretakers and stewards. And so I want to welcome you all tonight. Thank you for being with us, and I'll turn this back to Carolyn.
Thank you so much, Chuck. I meant to say earlier, but before I introduce our next speaker, I'll just say that we used the webinar format tonight because we had such a large registration. So you can't see one another, but you could use the chat function to introduce yourself to other people, and I think you can see a participants list of who's here. So that's a way in which we can appreciate who's here. And you might say who you are and maybe where you're from if you put that into the chat. Now I'd like to invite Diana Mokpo, the wife of Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche, to make some remarks. Diana met Trungpa Rinpoche at a Free Tibet rally in England, and they were married, I think, very early in 1970, and she was with him in North America, came with him to North America, and was with him until his death in 1987. She's been very much involved with his legacy, supporting the publication of his work, and supporting senior and new students who want to engage his teachings and help to share them with the world. She's been a strong supporter of this project, the Opening the Dharma Treasury Editors Group, and we're delighted to have her here this evening to make some remarks. So, Diana, I hope you'll address us. Thank you.
Well, I think the first thing is to give tremendous thanks to everybody who is involved in this project. I think it's a wonderful book, and it's 47 years later, and these teachings are still so applicable. But the really interesting perspective is that Buddhism has continued for more than 2,500 years because it's been a tradition where the elders have continuously been willing to teach the next generation so that they can carry on the legacy. And this beautiful generosity of Carolyn and Judy, who have been willing to work with this wonderful group of young editors in explaining the nuances of how to present Trungpa Rinpoche's teachings. When I married Trungpa Rinpoche in 1970, his English wasn't terribly good. And within a decade, or less than a decade, he had created a new language for transmitting Buddhism in the West. That another incomprehensible feat from an incomprehensible person who was so brilliant. But the challenge in going forward in editing and transcribing and editing the work that still needs to be done, and there's a lot of that, is understanding the nuances and the way he expressed himself so that these teachings would be really accessible to Westerners. And Judy and Carolyn, I think, have been doing a remarkable job, the demonstration of which is how beautifully and how powerful this book is. So these teachings hopefully will continue to benefit people and be accessible, and that we will have a new generation who will be able to carry these teachings on into the future and find a way to make them accessible so that other people can study them. So thank you to everybody who's been involved and put their hearts into this project.
Thank you, Diana. And we're really happy to have you here. Now I'd like to turn to Nico Odysseus, who, when asked for his biography for this class, said only that he was the president of Shambhala Publications. And I queried him and he still said that was really it, what he wanted to say. But I do know he's been with Shambhala in that role for more than 10 years. And I think he's done a fantastic job in expanding their work and at the same time keeping the core of their mission. And he, as many of you would know, Shambhala Publications is the publisher of Chögyam Trumpa's work for a general audience. By and large, they do all of it, and they have over many years. And it's been a wonderful relationship, and it continues with Nico at the helm. So I want to thank him and Shambhala for all the support they've given to us and to many projects. And I hope that this continues long after I'm gone, actually. So Nico, I hope you'll say a few words this evening.
Sure. Thanks,
Yeah.
Carolyn. And hi, everyone. So I thought for my few minutes here, I would just zoom out a little bit and give people a little bit of history before connecting kind of the dots between what Chuck, Carolyn, and Diana have said. I thought I would just share how we started publishing Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche. And it was about 52 or 53 years ago now. Sam Burkholz, who was the founder of Shambhala Publications and still an owner along with his kids, Sarah and Ivan, had started a little bookshop on Telegraph Avenue in Berkeley called Shambhala Booksellers. And he was just, at that time, there weren't many books on meditation and mindfulness, Buddhism, other Eastern traditions. And so he was just sort of this omnivore combing through journals and newspapers to find these places and writing letters all over the world to get these books to sell. And in the process of that, he met a man named Vincent Stewart, who was a British publisher and a Gurdjieffian, who became really a mentor for Sam and took him under his wing. And I guess it was late 1968, he came to Sam and said, so I'm publishing this book by a Tibetan man named Chögyam Trungpa. Would you like to publish the US edition for that? And of course, Sam said, yes, let's do it. And that book became our first book, which is Meditation in Action. And it's funny when this story that I heard is when Trungpa Rinpoche got the US edition in his hand, he looked and saw the Shambhala on the spine, the name of the publisher, and just blinked his eyes. He couldn't believe it, just given his background and his, how the Shambhala tradition and the teachings that were to come forth have been so central. So there was this early connection between us and Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche. And, since then, I think we have about 50 books of his in print. Some of those are contained in the collected works. There's been over 200 editions over time. There's all these online courses and Diana's biography, Dragon Thunder, as well as another biography and a set of recollections. And there's just been so much that's happened. And I think it's really heartening for me as a publisher, as a Buddhist, as a person who really cares deeply and who was influenced very early by cutting through spiritual materialism. For those who don't have the book, I talk a little bit about sort of discovering that while in a small concrete, almost like a cell in Bodh Gaya about 30 years ago. And Chögyam Trungpa's had just such a profound effect on, and probably all of us here, because you're on this call today. But not just through him, but radiating through his students, like of course Pema Chodron and many others. And it's just wonderful to see. Now we're getting more demand for publishing South Asian editions. So we've been publishing some of Rinpoche's works printed in India and priced for that market. So it's really kind of a Coles to Newcastle situation where these books are going back to Asia, and people are reading them in English in Bhutan and Nepal and in India. And it's just really heartening. And I'm particularly happy to see this Opening the Dharma Treasury Editors Group come together and be trained by Carolyn and Judy Leaf, because it's really like this sort of, you know, as Diana was talking about, 2,500 years of Buddhism, having this tradition and this lineage cared for and passed on. And so it's really heartening to see this younger group of people. And our hope is this book, Cynicism and Magic, which really contains like so much of a very representative set of teachings of Chögyam Trungpa, reaching all these people. We had Devendra Banhart, the musician, record the audiobook for this, and he didn't want to receive any money for doing it. It was such he was so inspired by the project that he was like, this is great, I don't need to do anything. So yeah, I just want to thank also all the editors for this, and you know, everyone who's involved for really, you know, everyone involved is about wanting to make this book connect with people, so it really benefits them. It's not just a navel-gazing exercise. It's really what's in this book represents a lot of hope for individuals and our world. So with that, I will pass it on to Diana Getch, who is our next presenter. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Nico. I'll just give a little bit further introduction. We're going to move now to having a discussion and a presentation by two of the people who worked very hard on this book, Diana Getch and Matilda, or Tilly Perks. Diana came to the first Opening the Dharma Treasury workshop and to a number of subsequent ones. She became the lead editor of the book, meaning that everybody worked on it. We used it as a training exercise, these transcripts. First, people had to learn how to transcribe, and then we began working on the editing. But in the end, after a number of passes, it was very clear that we needed a small group to make sure that the voice was unified, and that it was one voice coming from Chögyam Trungpa, from all these different editors. And Diana's took that role, and she did a magnificent job, I think. I think everyone can see that. She is, in her life, also a poet of some note. She teaches writing, and right now she's just working on a memoir, which I think will come out next year. For me, it's been really wonderful to meet and get to know her. I appreciate so much the work that she and others have done. So I will turn it over to Diana.
Thank you, Carolyn. Yeah, I appreciate you too. This was a remarkable collaboration. I was wondering if somebody could just say that everyone can hear me okay. Do you think people can hear me okay? Cool. Yeah, Nico mentioned this coincidence about Shambhala. Well, I have a similar coincidence. At this time in 1974, I was a little kid in the backseat of a car listening to Three Dog Night, crooning this catchy tune called I'm on the Road to Shambhala. So that's what I knew. And it's a really good song. You probably know it by now. I think they use it for Toyota commercials. And but that just points to, you know, the generations, and that, you know, most of the editors coming in, these so-called new editors, most of us had never met Chögyam Trungpa. And you know, so we certainly met Carolyn and Judy, and you know, this collaboration, I called it a passing of the torch, you know, to a new generation. This plenty of Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche's, you know, tapes of his talks that still have yet to be transcribed, and a lot of material for a lot of new volumes. But I don't think it was quite the trial run. And I don't think it was quite the passing of the torch, because we still had Judy and Carolyn, and they were there to laugh at us, to shake their heads, shrug their shoulders, and there was it was very collaborative, with all of us. And just to give you an idea of that spirit, the title of the book, Cynicism and Magic, was not easy to arrive at. We had a series of brainstorms really over the years that were frankly embarrassing. And I think brainstorms should be embarrassing. We threw every title we possibly could. None of them were good, although we liked them at the time. I'll give you a couple of my suggestions. One was a quote from the first chapter: "What if so-called you became enlightened?" I thought, what about that? And then at another point I said, how about this quote: "Get up and walk." What if the book was called Get Up and Walk? And then something happened. We didn't just arrive at Cynicism and Magic. Judy turned to me at one point and she said, Diana, you're a poet. I want you to give new titles to every one of these chapters. Make them plain spoken English titles, just as an assignment. Let's get away from all the Sanskrit. And I did. And I came up with chapter titles like Our Basic Stupidity. And again, these were brainstormed at first. They didn't have to be titled that, but like, what if I had to come up with a plain spoken English title for some of these chapters? And another was called, I think it's like How the World Is. The Three Marks of Existence was what did we retitle it? Now I'm forgetting. Things as They Are. And then Be Cynical was the first chapter. And then later on in the process, Judy took a look at the first chapter and the last chapter, and out of nowhere, she just said, what about Cynicism and Magic? And since then, it appears that title, in hindsight, looks to be inevitable. I've seen early reviews of the book talking about, the natural division of cynicism and magic, and how could it be anything else? Well, it could have been Get Up and Walk. That's how it could be something else. So, we very much did this together. It was only at the end that people asked me to be a lead editor. I did not campaign for it, but it was very joyful to do, and also though with the help of everybody. Something that we said to each other the other day, in terms of the voice of the book. Judy said, this voice, there's something new about this voice. There's something different about this voice, even though we were shooting for just Chögyam Trumpa's voice, and the voice we've gotten to know as so helpful through the other books. And I just offered this idea, which I'll offer everybody here. And that's the notion that I think what happens with each of the 16 editors, as we edited the transcript, as we did our best second pass edit, etc., I think what we were doing was editing toward the voice of Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche that was in each of our heads, the voice of the guru in our head. And that's based on a lot of things. We've all heard him certainly through the recording, so we know what his voice sounds like physically, and his timing, and what he'd do with moments of humor, moments of suddenness. But then there's also, the chants, the sadhana of Mahamudra. There's the voice of Chögyam Trungpa in our lives and in our practicing. If we've done Guru Yoga, we've been chanting to him. And I think everyone has a slightly different and personal and valid voice of Chögyam Trungpa in our heads. And I think all we can do as editors is edit toward that voice. It's the voice we know. And I think maybe that might have something to do with how this can help but feel perhaps a little bit new. And then there's one other thing I wanted to mention, and it's from the editor's note I wrote, and I think it has to do with the course. I don't know how many of the 146 of you are going to be taking this course, and I think you could still sign up for it if you wanted to. Maybe we can ask the extended campus about that at some point. But one of the things that was remarkable to me is that these talks have been available in video online forever. I mean, I grew up, so to speak, listening to these talks and some of the most well-known teachings of Chögyam Trungpa. And I did not know that they had yet to be transcribed, nor did I know what would happen when we transcribed them. And if I could just read a couple sentences from the editor's note. A word in Tibetan, word that Tibetan Buddhists use called terma denotes Dharma treasures left in the earth or in the minds of students to be discovered at future auspicious times. I can say firsthand that this particular book is full of terma. I had watched these talks on video for years, as I mentioned. They contain some of the most well-known moments in all of Rinpoche's teachings. I was surprised to learn that this material had yet to be transcribed. And when we did, and when we gathered to read it, to read through the edited transcripts, we looked at one another in wonder, saying, "Wow, and can you believe this? And did he really just say that?" And there were all these new discoveries. And I think I would like the course to be about that. What is fresh? What is new? Not only what stayed fresh, but actually what is newly important, maybe that had never been seen before, about teachings this old for our moment. And that's what I'm looking forward to in the course. Maybe I'll turn this back to Carolyn. I probably already said too much.
Thank you, Diana. Not too much at all. I guess at this point, we'll hear from the other editor who's going to share the stage tonight, and that's Tilly Perks, or Matilda Perks, although I've never heard her really use that. Tilly is a graduate student getting her PhD in Buddhist studies at McGill University. She wrote the introduction to the book, and Diana wrote the editor's note, as she discussed. And Tilly, I think you could say she grew up in the Shambhala community, and at the same time, I find that she has a very inquiring and fresh approach to everything. Yeah, I think so. And she's going to say a few things, and then introduce a clip that we have to play from the original talk tonight. So I'll turn it over to her.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Yeah.
So I was asked to talk a little bit about writing the introduction for this book, and I just wanted to give you a sense of how that went. We had transcribed the talks and edited them, and I think we all came together to read through the manuscript together. And at some point when we felt like we had a book, the editors got together and sort of talked about what should be in the introduction. So the content of the introduction was really sourced from the group. And there were two questions that I think we really asked ourselves at that meeting. And the first was, what is this book? And the second was, who is it for? And I have notes from that meeting that I went over and looked at to just try to remember what the process was. And what struck me about my notes is that actually it was hard to pinpoint what this book is and who it's for. And I think that's because actually this book feels really expansive. On the one hand, it's an introduction to the Buddhist path, a full introduction. And on the other hand, it's the way that Trungpa Rinpoche talks about the topics, the way he presents the path is with such an uncompromising examination of the danger of spiritual materialism. And that feels really rare and subtle, or I think maybe nuanced. And I think we all felt really strongly that this book is also, it's not just for a beginning audience, it's also for an initiated audience too. And I think we all felt that we had been personally affected by these talks and the material. And in thinking and working with this material and thinking about my own approach to spirituality, and that my approach to spirituality does include things like, you know, wanting to reach a goal or to be happier or overcome, you know, my problems. Trungpa Rinpoche in these talks really points out that attitude involves a kind of aggression towards my life as it is right now, or even a subtle suppression of experience. And I think that that's really true. And I also think it's really unusual to hear that kind of truth. So this book feels like an introduction, but also like a really invaluable text for people who've been practicing for a long time too. So, and then there's another point that came out in our discussion, which is the fact that this book is something of an important historical resource. This is obviously a seminal event, the founding of Naropa Institute. And we talked a lot about what it must have been like to be in this class with Ram Dass teaching one night and Trungpa Rinpoche teaching the other night. And by all accounts, that was the nights that Ram Dass were teaching were this kind of love fest with lots of chanting and singing, and then Trungpa Rinpoche would talk, and those talks were somehow more sedate or even sobering, I think. And so actually one of my favorite things that he says to the audience in the first chapter of the book is he apologizes for being so ordinary and down. And by down, I don't think he means depressing. I take that to mean he's apologizing for attempting to ground everybody like on the ground. So anyway, there's this historical element here, and on the other hand, we all felt like this material was contemporary and timely. And so as I was writing the introduction, I was trying to put myself in the room more and more, in that room, and I found, what I think I found was a kind of resonance between 1974 and now. And that in the 70s, there's all of this massive cultural change. And it's a time when people are looking for ways to live their lives differently, and maybe in new and maybe unscripted ways that feel unknown. And I think we're also in a time now of a lot of change and uncertainty, and searching for a better way to live. So I think there's this resonance for me personally in all of this, and I think that's really captured in the question and answer period with the audience, because the questions that the audience posed to Trungpa Rinpoche, to me, are so, I mean, it's like everything. It's like, makes so much sense to me. And Rinpoche, answers all of these questions brilliantly. So I guess I just wanted to give you a sense of how expansive this book has felt for me working on it. And I think probably I can say that for all of us who worked on it. And how collaborative of an effort it was. And I guess I just want to express my appreciation for being a part of it. So we do have a clip to show, and this is a clip from the talk that is the first chapter of our book. The chapter is entitled Be Cynical. This is a clip from the question and answer part of that talk that I think touches on some of the most salient themes of the book. So we thought we would share it with you, and then maybe we will have a discussion.
when you were talking about snobbishness and like when you obtain enlightenment, to avoid ego trips, you said that you should avoid this because this is, then you said a word that I didn't understand. You either said Satanistic or sadistic, either meaning good or bad balance, or being sadistic, like punishing yourself. What did you mean?
I don't remember that particular second part.
Okay. It was well, I guess I'd like for you to just talk a little bit more about, like, realizing, like, if you realize that you've grown spiritually, what should you do with that, you know, as far as interrelating the balance of your ego and your spirit?
I could say in a very simple few words, that is, let us mock the ego, but let us build our spirit. Spirit in this case as a sense of inquisitiveness. There's something might have happened. There's a possibility of something's taking place. But ego's approach is that going to be good for me? Should I do it? Shouldn't I do it? If I get it, how much it is money's worth, so to speak. That is taking place all the time. I'm sorry, I don't think I have answered your complete question. But we could work out again. Anybody else? Try to make a question. At this point, I would like to ask you to ask the questions very simply and very basic. We could get into the depth as we go on. So try to work in the questions as something very basic, if you like, which would be helpful. Because when you ask your questions, you are sharing with the rest of the community here as well at the same time. Thank you. Somebody there? Yeah?
How do you take a basic cynical attitude? What's one step in being able to question everything without your ego interfering?
Well, the question is that you don't have to have a complete clearance without ego, particularly, which is impossible in any case. But as long as you have a glimpse of a cynical attitude, which is some kind of self-consciousness, self-critical attitude, at the same time there is a desire to be further, greater, expand your spiritual journey, that is enough. But one doesn't have to make 100% reassurance that you don't have to use your ego, which is impossible actually. So one have to give in to your ego as well as one have to give in to one's intuition at the same time.
Thank you.
So there it is. The whole thing right there. I think we are open to questions. If people have questions for us, they can write them in the Q&A section. Sorry?
I'm sorry, Tilly, you finish. I was just going to say, while we're waiting for some people to chime in, maybe with some questions, I just wanted to say, it's amazing for me to watch these students. They seem so lovable to me. It was like the last innocence left of America. I don't know. I know they're my elders now, But, you know, having been a teacher for a long time, a public school, like you can't have a teacher without students. I mean, there is no Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche without these shaggy, wonderful, messed up, Wilken-eyed people. And I just love watching these Q&A clips.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so easy to get so much out of them, actually, because these questions that people are asking are really the questions that I have now. Like, they really are so helpful. So.
And that little aside, he was teaching them how to ask a question at the same time. And in a way, he was teaching them how to be a teacher. You know, when you're asking questions, you're sharing it with the rest of the community here. You know, he was teaching in just the way they came to a microphone.
Yeah, we do have a couple of questions. One person put in the chat that they would love to know who these people who are asking questions are now. And I think in some cases we could do almost like roll a thing of then and now, not with the people who asked tonight. I don't know who they were, but it would be pretty shocking, I think, for those that we could identify. And then we have two questions in the Q&A. One was about whether or not the audio or video will be made available. And as you mentioned, Diana, actually the video is available on the Chronicles of Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche, which if you Google that, you'll get that site and you can find this seminar under the heading, The Tibetan Buddhist Path. But the other thing that's happening is that a lot of people are working on transcribing all the material, all of Chögyam Trungpa's talks, and correcting old transcripts, and are working to put together a new platform for all of that, which is going to be called Chella. And we'll have our first, like, probably major release of a lot of material around the time of the celebration of his death in April of next year. So I don't know if anybody else, if you want to chime in on anything else about the tapes. And I'm just going to answer these because they're procedural. The course sessions, it's asked, will they be available for those registered? And the answer is yes, indeed. They will be available to all registered. I'm not sure when those videos will be made available. Like, I don't know how long after tonight it'll be before you can see the program, but yes, that will be there for everyone who registers. And maybe then I could ask Tilly, there's a question for you from a man named Hudson Shotwell. And he says, Matilda Perk, can you please say more about how you see the situation today as comparable to the situation then, specifically?
Thanks. You want me to give you? I think there generally, I think there was a kind of, I think in the 60s and 70s, there was a kind of change. There was this cultural shift, and that people were able to throw off some kind of moral order that then, or in social order, and find maybe new ways of living. And I think that we are also now, I mean, very concerned with trying to find new ways of living that are more, and a new society that's more just, a new world that has more justice. And I think that's really unscripted in a way. That's really open. I mean, so that's sort of what I was thinking about. Does that answer your question, Hudson?
Carolyn, should we say who Hudson Shotwell is to us?
Well, among many things, he's a photographer, and he took two wonderful photographs that are in this book. There's so many things one could say about Hudson, but as far as this book goes, he was there in 1974, and he took an incredible photo from above. I've always wondered how he took it. Maybe and he got this photo of like 1,500 people.
amazing.
below. Yeah, it's an amazing photograph. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you get the book, you get the photo. A follow-up maybe to this from Stephanie Kaza for either of you. How can this book be helpful to people outside the Shambhala Buddhist tradition? Is it aimed primarily at people familiar with Chögyam Trungpa?
My sense is that it is totally accessible. My feeling is that it's not aimed at the Shambhala community or people who are familiar with Trungpa Rinpoche. And a lot of his audience at the time, you know, really were uninitiated and didn't have, this is the first thing maybe they heard about Buddhism. And it's the way that he presents the material is incredibly accessible. That's my feeling. What would you say, Diana?
Yeah, I think the hardest thing in the world to do is change a pattern. And I think maybe that's at the meeting point of psychology, therapy, spirituality, you know, dieting, whatever. How do I change a pattern? And America is full of people trying to improve themselves. And fine, that's fine. I think that's what Chögyam Trungpa loved actually coming here is we've got a lot of people trying to work on themselves. Ever since Ben Franklin wrote a graph about himself and why he only sleeps 3 hours a night because he's too busy approving, you know, filling out the chart. And I think that anyone, you know, who wants to change a pattern, this is as good a gateway as any. There's so many things here. There was a quote that somebody cited. I'm always looking for the new reviews of the book, and somebody put my favorite quote from the entire book on Goodreads. It's just the quote he picked. And it was when somebody asked him, one of these wonderful students said in one of these talks in the middle of the book, what do we do when we're done working this out? Is there anything worth living for? And at that point, and I'm going to be paraphrasing here, this is completely horrible, okay? But at that point, Chögyam Trungpa said, there's a whole nother way to live. This isn't the only way to live. There are all these other kinds of people and beings that are living to live, you know, and they're enjoying life moment by moment. And they're not doing what you're doing. It's not a project, you know, for them. And it's just, yeah, I think anyone could use that. I don't know if that answers the question exactly.
Okay, thank you. We've heard back from Hudson, who thanks you for your answer and says he likes reading the book. And also says that he got that photograph by climbing up into the rafters. Wow.
Wow.
He was young, I think. All right. So I'm gonna, they're not quite answering these in order, but I'd like to give you a question from Deborah Ross. And she has some nice things to say, and then she asks her question. She says, such timely teachings at this time of tremendous cynicism for democracy, capitalism, ecological destruction, the seemingly waning potential for social change. Can you say a little about the magic side of the teachings in this book? Just a little softball for you guys.
This is, what's her name?
Deborah Ross.
Deborah Ross has to come to the first session. If she's not already coming, she has to come because we're going to talk about, Tilly and I will be there, and we're going to talk about the redefining of cynicism or how it's been redefined away from maybe its original meaning. It used to be a good thing. But maybe Tilly wants to say more at this point.
Well, I think you get a little sense of it, a little taste of it in the clip that we showed, which is that he he exchanges cynicism for intuition in that clip. And I think that I really feel like he's trying to thread this needle. The magic part of the book is actually, for me, deeply mysterious. Like I don't know if I can explain that to you, but there is, throughout, he is really talking about spiritual materialism and how to be on a path without a goal and still go somewhere or something like that. And it's very, there's a lot. I mean, that's all I can say about that right now.
Carolyn, are we allowed to rely on you as an answerer as well? Or?
Sure, you can if you want. Well, I was just going to say that if Deborah Ross has to come to the first session, she has to come to the last session, which is about magic. And I'm going to make it possible for her to do that. Should she need any assistance. So Deborah, we'll see that you find your way to this class if you're able to come, so we can answer your questions. And for the rest of you, if you're interested in magic, you have to stick around till the last class.
But just the idea, the idea in that clip that he aligned cynicism with intuition, which is interesting, because usually the place of doubt, of analysis, cynical, is usually assigned to the intellect. In fact, even in our, we talk about intelligence and intuition, but cynicism is actually more like the intuition. Magic may be more like the intelligence. I haven't intuited that, but the idea that you could have a glimpse of cynicism the way you would have a glimpse of, Buddha nature, that cynicism could be a glimpse and not just, some kind of blade of intellect shutting down on, some piece of bullshit. Are we allowed to say bullshit in the webinar? Maybe we're not.
No, we're probably not.
No, we're not, no.
Okay, well, there are a couple of questions about our process and working on the book, so maybe I'll try and combine them. And there's one for me after that. But Kevin Jackson asked, what was a typical day in the life? Were we digging deep and getting lost in conversations about what CTR's style was in communicating deep human truths, as it were? And then someone else asked about this quality of community. What was the role of community in getting this book together? That was an anonymous person. So would either of you like to talk a little bit more about what it was actually like, the process? You said some things, both of you, but maybe a bit more.
Sorry, I think I got distracted by another question.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, yeah. So it was very much like what they're guessing, in the question. There was a lot of talk about his style. I think what I remember, especially in the beginning, was that we were in a genre that I had never been in before. I'd written a lot of prose, a lot of poetry. I knew what translating was. And what was this? What was this thing we were doing? And Carolyn, you and Judy were kind of, in some kind of intuitive way, just sort of touching on this, touching on that. But there was no analytical way to say what this was. And I wrote down that it was, partly translating, partly just clarifying editing, partly divination, partly just trying to read a ransom note. I mean, there was a lot of scratchy tape. You at one point claimed that he could have gotten much better at English because he had that kind of, brilliance, of course, but he on purpose didn't. So it would leave us more space to edit into. Do you still stand by that, Carolyn?
Oh yeah, look at the results, man. You guys edited way into this. It's impressive. I think it was kind of him to not speak better English, but kind that he was also brilliant. He had a better vocabulary than I do by far.
Yeah.
So Yeah,
There were
that's-
these wonderful debates around the table. We learned so much about each other. I mean, we were from different sanghas in a way. You know, the thing we had in common was we were all felt very connected to Chögyam Trungpa. But, you know, so we were learning about who each other was, the approaches we had. Yeah, I mean, you just open up a paragraph and suddenly you're talking about your life.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting doing this work from the transcription stage because everybody does hear really different things, and then you have to, you know, kind of dig in and be like, really, what did he say? I really wanted to answer Isabel's question about, is that okay, Carolyn?
yeah, it's fine.
The question is, did you try to transcribe Trungpa's intonations, timing, pauses, gestures? In 1975, I received a powerful teaching from Trungpa, just from gestures and not words. And the short answer is yes. That in transcribing, one does tend to want to get all of the non-tangible meaning onto the page. And there was a time when I was transcribing and I wanted to make sure that every time that Trungpa Rinpoche cleared his throat before he starts talking, that was captured on the page, because I felt like, because there's a story about how the first time he gave a teaching in Tibet, he was like, how am I going to do this? And his teacher was like, just you clear your throat and then you just start talking. And so I thought, this really needs to be captured. It has to be on the page. But then it gets really messy really fast and subjective really fast. And so then you end up having to, you know, go the other way, scale it back and keep the mystery or the spaces or the meaning, you know, open for people who are reading it. That's my feeling about that.
And now we have another guest host presenter, Judy Lee. I'd like to ask her if she'd like to weigh in on any of this as one of the mentors to this group.
All right. Anyway, yes, I was inspired so much by what was said. I'm so proud of all the people that we worked with there, that they say that what's been trained will be better than the trainers by far. But I wanted to weigh in on the magic a little bit because that didn't go very far. And what I found that to me, which was so profound about what Trungpa Rinpoche emphasized in talking about magic, is the magic that we miss. He said, this is magic. Being here, listening to this talk, waking up in the morning, having a life, all of that is magic. The magic is right present. And I think a sense of kind of expanding a sense of what we consider ordinary from a viewpoint, someone like him is full of magic already. And so I think that was a real important in terms of cutting, another way of cutting spiritual materialism, but also a sense of immediacy and the present moment experience. If you think about the fact that you're experiencing anything at all, here and now, that's magic. As he talks about it, I think. So I really like that. That was it. My way in. Had to say something.
Great. Well, while you're here, there was a question to me, but it was really, I think, to both of us from Gene Gunner, and maybe I'll ask you your comment. He asked, he or she, I'm not sure, how does it feel to be handing over these precious teachings to the new generation of editors? I just started the book and I love it. The voice does feel different, feels fresh and a bit groundless.
Well, handing it over feels fresh and a bit groundless, actually. And it's, to me, it's a dream come true in a certain way, you know, to be able to pass this on and to have people interested in pursuing this kind of work, to at least as for part of what you all do. And the fact that at least this initial group was able to pick up on this so splendidly just gives me hope, because I keep thinking of all these amazing books that are in there that are not out for people to enjoy and for people to benefit from. So I see it as, you know, what we've been trying to accomplish all these years, but there's much more material than we could ever do in our lifetime. So I feel quite confident about the future of this work. So it feels good to me, and a little bit, you know, I'd like to keep doing it forever, but I'm not going to be around forever. So I'd rather pass the baton. And I like the idea that a good editing is supposed to be invisible in a way. You're not supposed to really see the editor, but in fact, you always do. And so having the voices coming from the current different times and different generation is really what's needed. It's really what's needed now. And so I feel that's what should be done. And I think it's being done well. So I feel very proud that Carol and I could somehow muddle our way in. We had never tried to train anyone before. I hadn't. We talked about it for years, but we never could figure it out. And so to know that we actually, I don't know if it was our training or just had a natural ability, all of you, but it felt good that we finally crossed that threshold and took that step to offer to all of you.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of magic in the whole thing, and yeah, and it was like way beyond our expectations, whatever those were. So still is. So yeah. All right. Well, we're reaching the closing time. And I'd like to keep Tilly and Diana here and invite a few other of the editors who are in the audience this evening. I think they're here. I can't tell really. We lost Judy. Well, we should have her here too, because she's a mentor and very much one of the very, very involved. But there are a few of the other of the 16 who are on that list. I'd like to see if we can bring up Daniel Nguyen. I always mispronounce your last name, Daniel, from Montreal. Hopefully you have to turn your video and audio on for the extended campus people to find you. So I'll read, there looks like Daniel is coming in because I can see his name now. Yes, okay. Hi, Daniel. Daniel, in his spare time, is a doctor in Montreal, working in palliative care and other disciplines. Lovely to see you. Also, Carla Marie Burns, an instructor at Naropa, who's also key to programs for CASE, the Center for the Advancement of Contemplative Education. And she's someone who's done a tremendous amount of work with the Maitri and Mudra teachings. And I don't know if she's here. Yes, she is. And there she is. Great. Lovely to see you. Also, I hope Harry is here, Harry Einhorn. He will be joining us from Taiwan. He teaches lately at a university there. This is his second year, and I don't know what time of day or night it is for him. So we'll see.
He reported some technical trouble.
Oh, did he? Oh, okay.
He did,
well,
yeah.
All right. Well, maybe we won't see him. That would be too bad. And finally, Nate Spear, who I believe is coming to us from New York. And who works in the field of mythopoetic astrology and other things. Hi, Nate. Haven't seen you in a while.
Hi, yeah, it has been a long time. It's good to
Yeah.
see you all.
Yeah.
Hi.
So would any of you care to add anything to what's been said about your experience or feeling about the book? Anything like that? You don't have to. I just. But in any case, we want to thank you, all of you. And so, yay. Thanks so much. Yeah. For all you do and for making this a part of your life. Next week, as Diana and Tilly have mentioned, we will be talking about positive cynicism and spirituality. And the presenters are Diana Getch, Daniel Nguyen, and Tilly Perks. The week after is an exploration of ego's game. And that's with Dr. Amelia Hall, who teaches at Naropa. Travis May, who is head of practice and study for Boulder Shambhala, and I'll be a presenter. So just in general, we're hoping that each week there'll be opportunities to kind of dive deep into the topic. There'll be some breakout rooms, close reading, and other tools. In future weeks, you can look forward to Borrowing the Buddha's Heart with Compassion in Action with Carla, Marie Burns, Ramon Parrish, and Chuck Leaf, an evening with Lewis Hyde and Diana Getch on song and poetry, and other presentations coming up. You still can register for the course between now through next Sunday, the 10th. And as was mentioned, the book is available from Shambhala with a 30% discount if you would like to own it. So we actually are running ahead of time. So let me look and see if there are any more questions. I'll have to bring you people back up. Mostly these are not, sort of substantive questions. So we may be reaching the end of our evening 15 minutes early. My God. Any closing questions or answers? Any of our presenters want to raise their hand to make some last remarks?
Well, let me just say, I'll do a commercial announcement for the Naropa Extended Campus.
Okay.
Just inviting people. Naropa over the years has had all sorts of extended studies and professional studies and a lot of different things. But now under the direction of Austin Pick and of Jacob, who's on, we're really kind of renewing our work in both short form, one evening kinds of events, and mid form like this great course, which we're really excited about. And then going all the way to some really significant work that we're doing here, most notably next spring, launching a 10-month, 200-hour certificate for professional mental health counselors and chaplains who are interested in getting a certificate in the use of psychedelics assisted therapy. Not probably something that many of you on the call are looking to do in that depth, but we're moving back into professional development in a pretty big way. And so if you're not already checking out the extended campus, do so and get on a mailing list, and we can send you the sort of range of offerings that we're going to have, which will include the arts and the sciences and Dharma teachings like this. And so it's terrifically fitting that our first course is this course, very exciting. And so we invite you to join us here or anywhere else that might interest you.
Thanks, Chuck. So I'd like to thank all of you who joined us this evening and encourage you to take a look at this book. We hope you'll buy it, read it. Someone asked whether it's available as an audio, there is an audio book. And there was another question about an ebook. And I don't know whether it's available yet in ebook format, and I will have to ask Nico, and I don't think he was able to stay till the very end.
No, it is available
Oh.
in over 100 different ebook outlets, including, you know, all the usual suspects.
Okay, great. All right, thanks, Nico. And can people find information about that from you on your site, or would they go to Amazon, or what's the best?
Wherever they
Wherever.
I saw the questioner was from
Yeah.
Asia, so just look for, you know, Amazon.jp, any of the places where you find ebooks normally should
Okay,
have it.
great. And then there's another question about where, as I was saying, there's somebody asking about the 10,000 songs of Milarepa and Chögyam Trumpa's commentary on those. And again, I hope that we'll have your information to keep you apprised of what's happening with this project, Chögyam, the platform that we're developing, because we very much want to make available Trungpa Rinpoche's teachings in both the audio, video, if we have it, and also transcripts. And as you saw tonight, I wanted to thank actually Warner Dick, who I'm not sure he's here this evening, but he did the captioning of that little piece. And you probably don't even notice it when it's well done. But if you don't have it and you're struggling to hear what a questioner said or what Chögyam Trungpa said, it really makes a huge difference to then have captioning. So we're going to be providing that as well for as many of these recordings as we can. So it's a project of about, there are approximately 2,500 unique recordings of Chögyam Trungpa teaching, and the originals of those are held in the Shambhala archives in Halifax. The Chögyam Trungpa Institute has what I think is becoming the definitive digital record of that material. And of all of that, there are approximately 1,600 events, which is quite a lot of material that we can make available as for a general audience. And so that's what we're working on, how to organize it and present it so that it's most useful for people. And if that works, then yes, you'll be able to listen to and read transcripts of what Trungpa Rinpoche had to say about Milarepa. And you can also read a book that was edited based on those transcripts that Judy Leaf edited and is available. Again, it's not quite the same as hearing his own voice. So you have all of those resources. So is there anything else from extended studies before we close for the night? I think we'll close with a bow again. Oh, Jacob, anything from you or Austin? Nothing. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here. Wonderful to hear from these young editors and all of us old fogies who are contributing. And again, thank you, Chuck, for the incredible instruction on the bow. I never had it totally with Barbara's instructions. Really great. So based on that, let's bow out and say good night.